This is the Leica Summicron-R 50mm f2 lens. It was sold as a standard lens for Leica's Leicaflex SLR cameras with R bayonet mounts. The lens was very kindly lent to me by Leon. Leon's an excellent photographer and an avid collector of fine old lenses. I'll provide a link to his Flickr albums in the description below. Now I've had a chance to try the lens, is it worth buying? Well, I can answer this question very quickly. Yes, it is worth buying. However, that's really the wrong question. The lens is quite expensive for a slow old f2. It sells for anything between $350 and $450, and sometimes more online. A better question would be, is the lens worth buying at these prices? Because for these prices, you can buy some pretty damn good old faster 50s. And there are at least two other questions to consider. Is f2 just too slow for today's digital world? And are you paying a premium simply for the Leica name association and the cachet of owning a Leica lens? These are the questions I'm going to attempt to answer in this video, after going over the specs and showing you how Leon's lens performs. The lens itself was made in a number of different versions. There are two basic versions, 1 and 2, which you could also call the old and the new designs. Leon's lens is the old design. Apparently over 95,000 of these lenses were made between 1964 and 1976. And here are the new designs. Just under 100,000 of these lenses were made between 1976 and 2009. With the old design there are also different versions, starting with the so-called 1 cam. Leica updated the lens as they updated the functionality of their SLR cameras. After the first version they produced a 2 cam and then a 3 cam version of the lens. By the way, the Leica's name, in case you didn't know, was changed to Leica in 1986. Leon's lens, according to the serial number, was made in 1966 and is the first version. According to online sources, the earliest Summicron-Rs, including this one, had 6 elements in 5 groups. The lens has 6 aperture blades and a minimum focus distance of 0.5 meters. The optical design was changed to 6 elements in 4 groups for the new style version. The lens was made in Wetzlar, Germany, before the production was moved to Canada in 1977. In terms of its physical design and construction, the lens is very well made. The aperture mechanism feels very solid. The focus is smooth, but I found the focus ring a little too narrow and sometimes missed finding it when I was hurrying to refocus. But I guess if I own the lens and use it for a long time, I get used to that. There's a light snap-on hood, and a hood is highly recommended to reduce flares and improve contrast. I never took this off. I've been using the lens with an adapter for Sony E-mount digital cameras. It's easy enough to find these adapters and they don't cost a lot. If you have a Leicaflex SLR camera, then the version of the lens you use, 1 cam, 2 cam or 3 cam, depending on the camera model, is important. If you're using the lens on an adapter with another camera, such as the Sony, then in terms of functionality, which is all manual, it doesn't matter which version you use. Optically, I've read the 2 cam version tends to perform better than the 1 cam version because it has improved coatings, while the later Leica Canada version has stronger contrast, not always to everyone's taste. This is what I've learnt online. Please correct me if any of this information is wrong. Let's start the review of performance by looking at how the lens performs wide open, its sharpness, and the bokeh wide open. The first thing to say is that this lens is impressively sharp up close for an old lens wide open at f2. Here are some examples taken outside. They're all close up. At infinity it's not really worth looking at wide open sharpness. It's far better to stop down. And inside, on a more formal tabletop test, the lens renders in-focus objects and lettering up close very well. It's especially noticeable that the lens doesn't produce a lot of the kind of ghosting you can see around white letters produced by some fast 50s from the mid-1960s. I'm not going to overhype the praise, however, because I've used other f2 or slower lenses that are impressively sharp wide open, including, for example, my venerable old Leica Elmer 53.5 from the 1930s. I added some contrast to the shot, but no sharpening. Nevertheless, the Summicron is nice and sharp wide open, and as you'd expect, it sharpens up further as you stop down. I'm not so keen on the 6-bladed hexagon out-of-focus highlights at the first stop down. They're quite jagged, But after that, the lens renders these hexagons in a more attractive way, with smoother edges. And anyway, you may not spend a lot of time chasing partially stopped-down highlights. The lens is sharp enough wide open to use wide open if you're into bokeh-rich images. Talking of bokeh, this is an area where I wondered how well the Summicron would perform on digital sensors. Would the out-of-focus blur be good or not? Would it be beautiful or blotchy? Well, it turns out the out-of-focus rendering is, I think, very beautiful. With uncluttered backgrounds, the bokeh is soft and smooth, with excellent transitions. You're not seeing that unnatural sliver of in-focus areas you see with some fast 50s. And subject isolation is good, especially if you're trying to smooth out a busy background. Where there's a very busy background, the lens handles all the action very well in my opinion. But this is only my opinion, because the bokeh is certainly quite distinctive. Taking this image as an example, I'll try to describe what I mean. The out-of-focus areas are soft, but still clearly defined. The whole image is full of interesting shapes, patterns and colours, but the overall impression is quite artistic. It is a kind of impressionistic look. Aside from the rendering, a key point to make about the lens is that f2 is not too slow to produce attractive in to out-of-focus transitions. Here's a shot with the f2 compared with an f1.4 lens. Yes, the bubbles are smaller and the background is a little less blurred with the f2, but if you look down the side of the house, the Summicron is still giving us attractive transitions from in to out-of-focus. I've very much enjoyed taking photos wide open with this lens, and the images don't need a lot of processing to bring out the best of the effects. Finally, on wide open performance, flares and aberrations. The lens does flare if you point it straight at the sun, of course it does. The hood seems to control light leaks coming from the side very well. When I've taken wide open photos of these railings almost into the sun with other old lenses, you tend to see more flaring. And as for chromatic aberrations, sticking with this image, there's hardly any purple fringing apparent wide open. This shot is informative because with some other lenses I've seen a lot of fringing wide open on the old Kodak camera, but from the Summicron there's only a tiny bit apparent. The Summicron is an excellent portrait lens, wide open and stopped down. We were having a tough time finding something we wanted to buy at a department store, and perhaps it wasn't the right time to get the camera out, but I really like the rendering here. It certainly captured the mood. If there is such a phenomenon as the Leica look, with this lens I feel it comes out in portraits. Images have a very pleasant glow, with a very complementary mix of in-focus details and smooth eye-catching bokeh. These portraits are straight out of camera, and I think this is a great credit to just how well the lens performs if you get the settings right. Other old lenses sometimes still need quite a lot of tweaking, even if the exposures are good. Here are a few other portraits I took with the lens. Now on to stop-down performance, particularly as a walk-around and landscape lens, and the lens's edge-to-edge sharpness, contrasts and colours. I'll start with colours because on the Sony sensor, this lens produces rather rich colours. And by rich colours I mean strong, bold blues and rich, vibrant reds and oranges. These strong colours tend to impact the green tones, making them a little reddish to my eyes. So the colours are quite striking for an old lens when the light is good, and when the light is not so bright, the tones are rather lovely. Not a golden tone, but a sort of rich reddish tone. All but one of these images have been stopped down. Wide open, the colours are sometimes even more gorgeous, with a sort of soft luminosity. The lens also produces great images for converting into black and white. In terms of sharpness stopped down, considering it's well over 50 years old, the lens is seriously sharp. I could zoom into any number of infinity stop-down photos I've taken with the lens to show you just how sharp it is, but here are a few examples. Maybe the sharpness drops off a little by the edges of the frame, but it's livable even for landscape images. With night shots, the lens produces some nice starbursts top down. And wide open in the dark, the bubbles are very attractive. I don't know what precise coatings were applied to the glass, but from observation, the way the lens handles bright and dark contrast is okay, but nothing special. If you take this scene as an example, the brighter light parts would be better controlled by better coatings. You could dial down the exposure, but then the rest of the scene would be too dark. This is quite normal for old lenses, it's not a big issue. You just have to be aware of the limitations of the coatings in specific compositions. In conclusion, I do like how this lens performs. It's sharp, distinctively colourful, and it has rather beautiful bokeh. So what about those questions I asked at the start of the video? Firstly, is the lens worth the price it sells for today? On one level, yes it is, because that's the price people seem to be willing to pay. It's not a particularly rare lens, and it's not particularly fast, but it does have other virtues. Are there better alternatives for the price? Well, I think this depends on precisely what you're expecting from a fast 50. If you want an ultra-fast lens with extremely narrow depth of field, say an f1.4 or even an f1.2, then obviously it's not the lens for you. But I found the lens was easily capable of good subject isolation and smooth blur wide open. f2 isn't too slow for most purposes. This is a more difficult question to answer than I expected before trying out the lens. Before trying the lens, I thought, yes, there's undoubtedly a premium for the Leica name, even if it's really called a Lights, and it probably shouldn't cost as much as it does. However, now I'm not so sure. It's actually a very good lens. Maybe it should cost a little less, given the competition from other excellent manual focus fast 50s, but you won't be wasting your money if you buy one. The bottom line is whether I'm going to rush out and buy a copy of the lens now I've borrowed one, and maybe before its price goes up again. And the answer to that final question is no, I'm not going to rush out and buy one. Good though it is, and as much as I'd like to own as many Leica lenses as possible, I have other lenses I'd like to buy and try. So thank you so much, Leon, for giving me a chance to try this wonderful old lens without me having to buy one. And thank you for watching. Any comments are most welcome. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so, and until the next time, all the best.